to end. The apartheid government, it was highly bankrupt to the extent that in 1993, what was then called the Transitional Executive Council had to even take a loan from the IMF. You know, de Klerk did not negotiate because shows limitations in terms of the succession debate or the succession plan. But also it exposes, for me, a deficit. If you look at President Zuma, of all the women that he would know, he chose his own daughter to lead, who has no political background, but he chose his own daughter. When you speak of Colin Makhubela, I mean, Colin had millions from the Jewish community. And as you would know, before the elections and towards the elections, she was the flag bearer for Israel. It's also on Jacob Zuma. Remember, MK Party does not have any ideology. It has not gone to conference. It does not have any theory. So anyone can lead, depending on who President Zuma chooses, not because they are fit and proper. I can tell you now that there are many women who are in MK Party who are very solid. I was assisting MK. I was one of the people who was very loud on the representation of women, the representation of people who are not Zulu. I mean, there are people who say that I'm angry because I did not take a position, or if I was not given a particular position. Of course, I was promised different positions within MK. But those who know me, including Klamulo Ndlela, women, I don't think President Zuma even cares. You know, I'll tell you this. There are over 100 people who are undergoing trials, you know, because they supported or they are considered to have led the insurrection, the President Zuma insurrection in July. Over 100. MK does not support any of them. Yet when Duduzile went to court, the entire MK leadership went to support her. Yet you have all these people who, in the name of Jacob, they went to the meeting, but they were late. And also, you know, there's one thing that Arthur Zwane is not credited for. Arthur Zwane is the one who pushed for Brian Molefe to be in parliament. And it was through me. And you know, I've been waiting for Brian to at least recognize how I ensured that, you know, he goes to parliament. And, you know, Arthur Zwane and other people, they managed to facilitate that process. Because if you recall, at the time, they had brought in Judge Hlophe. When he came in, he went to, I think, to the SABC at the time, and he was asked, why did you join MK? He said, no, it's a Zulu party, or, you know, something along that line.
He wanted to go EFF, but he said, let me wait. And when he saw MK with that...
to compete globally with our equals. Traore is there to serve the interest of Russia. And for me, it's an indictment, again, because, you know, what is quite interesting is that Africans are not looking for solutions in Africa, to the extent that in South Africa, the very people...
Mashiane Politically Incorrect. Phapano Pasha, you wanted her, we got her. She's been very kind to allow her into a working space. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to shoot straight ahead so I can understand her politics. Phapano,
I'm good, thank you. And how are you?
I'm good.
Afternoon to the viewers.
Hey, Tadakyo Mashiane from Politically Incorrect. I just want to check something. I'm going to shoot straight ahead. There's a narrative that says Jacob Zuma brought back Cyril Ramaphosa. And Jacob Zuma is all saint. The ANC of Ramaphosa is the one that is to be blamed for everything. Just unpack it for me. Is it true? Is it confirmed? What narratives can you give us just to massage our brains on things that we could have forgotten?
Okay. No, thank you so much. I think for me personally, when I resigned from the ANC, I resigned for my own reasons, not necessarily because of President Ramaphosa, but of course, when I was called in to assist MK Party after it was formed, in terms of its war room, we were specifically told that we must not attack the ANC in particular, but the ANC of Ramaphosa. And I would presume that President Zuma would have taken that position because, as you rightly say, the analysis at the time was that the ANC had lost its historical mission in terms of being a disciplined force of the left and the working class in particular. But it's, when you look at the ANC internally and when you go outside of the ANC, you would realize how the dynamics are quite different in terms of geopolitics and, of course, the economy of the country, which is primarily still in white hands. So you also realize that it's difficult for any president to maneuver when the reality is that we as the black majority do not control the means of production. And it makes you understand also why after Chairman Mao passed on and Deng Xiaoping took over in China in 1977, he ultimately said that it doesn't matter the color of the cat as long as the cat knows how to catch the mouse. So, within the, if you look at the ANC now and the constraints, as I said, you would really understand, the impediments of any president in the context of South Africa, especially when I indicated that the fact that we do not control the commanding heights of the economy. So I think it becomes a bit mischievous because any president of the ANC or all the 4 presidents of the ANC that have taken over, they've all vacillated towards the markets. And I don't think it's by default. I mean, 2008, when President Zuma took over post-Polokwane, he went to meet George Bush in Washington, where he promised him that he would not deviate from where Mbeki had started, that South Africa would continue being an investor-friendly country. So it's, as I said, I think it's mischievous in a way to then expect any president of the ANC with the conditions that we're in to say that that president must be anti-West, anti-investors. When President Zuma himself was pro-investors, he worked closely with French companies, for example, that MK is now calling imperialist and so forth. So when it comes to how President Ramaphosa became a president, of course, it was President Zuma who deployed him as the deputy chairperson of what was then called the National Planning Commission in 2010. And what that commission was meant to do was to develop a blueprint for his government, because he took over in 2009 from Kgalema Motlanthe. So Ramaphosa came in as the deputy chairperson of that NPC, and the NPC was led by Trevor Manuel at the time, and you had the likes of Bobby Kotsel and others. So if you were to look at the composition of the NPC that was within the office of the president, if you were to analyze the NPC to say today, you would agree that it was poor market, it was poor investors and so forth. However, of course, President Zuma is no longer in charge. How he sees this administration would be quite different. And lastly, on this point, what is evident is that, luckily for President Zuma, he is serving his 3rd term actually, which Thabo Mbeki could not do. Perhaps he could have done it with Cope, but through MK, he is serving his own term, his 3rd term, and he is dictating terms. Unfortunately, within the democratic constraints of the ANC, he could not have continued, which is a limitation for any leader, for any African leader who prescribes to democracy. Because unlike China, Russia, you do not have the luxury to serve for over 30 years, where you would implement your policies unfortunately, in the context of South Africa, you are only given 2 terms to serve. And that is, well, perhaps a challenge and an opportunity for the ANC, because any leader within 10 years, they would not have been able, to fulfill or to implement all their policies. But President Cyril Ramaphosa is a product of the ANC and is a product of the contradictions of South Africa and, of course, the national question. So I think for all of us, especially students of politics, analysts and researchers, it's important that when we look at our country, we really look at the constraints of our country, the history of our country, and the reality that as Black people, we are merely consumers, we are job seekers, and as it is, we do not have any conviction to own the means of production so that we are able to assist those who are in charge so that they give direction to the policies that they would want to implement, because at the moment they do not have any control.
Thank you. You spoke about Russia, you spoke about the French influence in Africa and how they continually meet and engage with even those who were colonized by the English. We're currently having a problem where Wagner is said to be leaving certain parts of the Sahel, and other people are saying it's a mission well done for them. They are leaving. Other people are saying there are Russian companies deep inside Burkina Faso who are taking mega projects, and we are not aware of. And if you replace the West, you are bound to replace them with something, and the Russians are taking advantage of that, and they're not going to be kind. They're going to do exactly the same thing that the West have done. Is it something to fear? Because we think, including myself, we think Ibrahim Traore is going to be a beacon of hope in South Africa. In Africa? Are we overexcited about something that's not going to change much?
No, it's an indictment for any South African to believe in someone like Traore. It means that we do not travel. It means that we do not know about the conditions and the politics of the continent. Ask any person who has been to Burkina Faso or the Sahel region to make a comparative analysis between our country and those countries. They will tell you that South Africa is paradise. With all its constraints, with all its challenges, it will take Burkina Faso, I think, 50 years, if not more, to have the infrastructure that we have, to have the systems that we have, to have the policies that we have that have enabled us to compete globally with our equals. Traore is there to serve the interest of Russia. And for me, it's an indictment again, because, what is quite interesting is that Africans are not looking for solutions in Africa, to the extent that in South Africa, the very people who hero worship Traore, they are highly xenophobic. They cannot stand their African counterparts. They have got the highest detest for fellow Africans who are in South Africa. When they speak of foreigners, they only look at those who look like them, being Africans. They do not even see Europeans or the Chinese or even Russians as foreigners. Yet, when they see Traore, they see this version of Pan-Africanism when they are neo-nationalists in character. So I think for me that discussion of Traore is neither here nor there. It's just a frustration of many of our people who, of course, are still to see the ray of liberation. But there's a lot of opportunities in our country. And that is why the majority of Africans, including people from the Sahel region, that's why they are coming to South Africa, because they are seeing the opportunities that we, the natives, do not see. They come here to work. They come here to create jobs. Of course, you'd have the criminal elements. Of course, you'd have challenges of porous borders. But Traore is not a beacon of hope. Traore is just a piggyback for Russia, which is under sanctions, which needs a chaotic Africa in order to extract our minerals, as it's happening now, as they're extracting the gold, the oil, and the uranium of the Sahel region without any impediments, without any governance. So I just want to say that we ought to learn from Nyerere, the late Julius Nyerere, who gave a speech in 1961 about the second scramble for Africa, where he taught us and he left us with a lesson that our solution is not in the East, it is not in the West, it is not in capitalism, it is not in socialism, and it is neither in those who arm us so that we can kill each other and they can take our minerals. The solutions is ourselves as Africans. And unfortunately, because of our self-hate, because we do not see each other beyond the borders, we do not see how African integration and trade can enhance and make Africa competitive, will still be behind. Everyone else who's not African will come and exploit us. And when they come here as our saviors. They come here to arm us. They do not want democracy. They want coups. Because as I said, they thrive in chaos. They thrive in instability. They thrive where children become soldiers, where young girls cannot go to school. So any military leader is not a beacon of hope. We must just fix our systems. We must better our systems as Africans, and we must make our leaders accountable. If we don't, we must blame ourselves, not the system that is in place.
Thank you. You are eagerly waiting for me to interrogate most of the things that she has said. You want me to challenge her. You want me to defend. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to continue. I'm going to disappoint you. Right there on the comments if you need to. Papa, no, I just did Ratam Hwatling's critique yesterday, and I felt there are many. When we were transforming the judiciary, we sent a lot of people, a lot of, and I just coined the word political lawyers. Mm-hmm. We threw them into all of these bars. Of course, we're struggling with making sure that the gender parity is also consistent with our wishes. But there are a lot of these political, let me say, politically inclined jurists who, from Chief Justice to your basic lawyers, they are always there. There are a lot of kids in UNISA who are studying law and who are politically inclined. So there's no level of political thought that does not exist with our learned people. And I got to think, man. Most of political parties, they would tell us how difficult it is to change things. They would also, of course, mention Section 25. They make it very complex when the others tell you that that thing is actually very easy. And I feel at some point it is capital that makes, because they fund our political leaders. And I spoke to Professor Siposiepe in UNISA, I think last year, just after the elections. I was telling him that 66% by the SPI organization, that is ANC, EFF, and MK, is what they have as a base. But they still do not want to tackle Section 25. They all claim they want the land, but no one wants to take this to the courts. Even in Parliament, they don't want to agree. Rhetoric as a country, why are we not moving if we've got lawyers who even brag of their political connections, their political teachings ever since they were young? What is the problem?
Okay, let's start by Judge Rata. Were you referencing him in context to what he said?
Yes, let me give an example. He name dropped Cyril. He said Cyril was his junior. Yenake Mutlogolo wa Moses Kotane, when he was in the house, Mandela used to come, and then he was taught by Thabo Mbeki. He mentioned like a whole array of people, So I use this as an example of these jurists and politicians. They are actually not far apart. So there's no politician who can claim we do not have lawyers who can advise us on how to tackle Section 25. So if these people were trained and they said they were ready to govern, now they are in governance, others are in legislature, others are in the executive, and then others are, of course, in the judiciary. All these three levels of government are infiltrated by people who say they want land. Why are we not achieving land?
Look, I think when you are in politics like ours, it was easy to say land expropriation and nationalization when you are inside. Because, of course, someone like myself, I have never ran a spaza shop at that particular point. But I knew more, I could theorize about the economy and what needed to happen, including the land question. But unfortunately, the reality is that the real life it's not as easy as we want it to make it. Black people are currently in control of political power. Our government has dispersed a lot of land to black people. And unfortunately, when you look at the results and what we aspire for, the results are quite dire, because it's quite evident that when you give people who do not have the know-how, the assets that they cannot manage, they are bound to lose those assets. I think for me, what is critical, we need to do what China, Singapore, Japan, South Korea, Germany, of course, including France, post World War II. We need to start creating human capital or human potential. We need to start creating people who will be able to manage these assets. Now you can imagine many of us who come from politics, of course, who are highly, we are performers, you know. We speak of land ownership, we speak about the commanding heights of the economy, but we've never owned or started a company which hires at least more than 5 people. So I'm just saying that it's important that we capacitate ourselves so that when we start owning this commanding heights of the economy, there will be ripple effects. We'll be able, to ensure that we create wealth, that whatever we have, it's sustainable. It is not true that in South Africa, people have not owned land. It's not true, or they've not been given land. It is not true that people have not been given companies. In a year, black people, and those who are not even in political parties, they get tenders worth billions, tenders worth millions, but you can't see an industry that they have started because we do not have the skills. We have been given the money, but we have not been given the know-how of how to sustain all these millions that we are getting. So for me, it's quite easy as a politician to then start saying that the challenges that we are having as a country is because of land. It's because we do not own the means of production. But I totally differ. We must be coached. We must be mentored so that we do not just own and after 2 years we own nothing and we are selling. Because the reality is that the farmers, the black farmers who have been given land, the majority of them sold this land back to Afrikaners. So those are some of the realities, and I believe these are some of the real and tough conversations that we need to have as black people, because we do not have the know-how. And our government, of course, has they have done a lot for many of us, through the policies, through affirmative action, through BEE, through government incentives, the Department of Agriculture, in the Department of Land. I can tell you of many farmers who are benefiting from our government. But what is the limitation at the moment is the know-how. So I'm just saying that we must have a conversation about turning ourselves into a human capital, turning ourselves into human potential, so that we start adding value to our economy. Because white people are not better than us. But throughout the few decades that they've been in charge, since 1910, when the Republic was established, their government and themselves as well. Because what is interesting is also when we speak about Afrikaners, we speak as if the private sector or the Broederbond did not initiate and push and pursue and also influence what the government, their government was doing. So in our case, we're waiting for the ANC to do everything for us. We're not able to come together and say, okay, there is shortage in in the township in terms of, producing young people who are skilled. And many of us who are or who sit in privileged positions as Black people, we are far from being the change that we want to see. We just want our government to continuously give us and improve our lives, but we do not give back to those who do not have. So I think for now, the issue of land, it's quite important, but we simply do not have the know-how. And over and above that, we would say we do not want investors or we demand jobs. People who come here as investors, they come with their own money. People bring in millions to the country so that they can create jobs, so that they can maximize profits. So what they need is a return on investment on what they are putting in the country. It's not as if any government or our government is giving them resources. It's their money. But because we have expectations, we do not have the money. We just simply believe that because it's our land, we are entitled. Unfortunately, the real world does not work like that.
Is it not because we have in the past, I'm talking, people are talking about talks, minutes, prelude to those CODESA meetings. People have been sitting in those things and being gradually softened up to understand that once you are in government, there's nothing called, how do I put it? Let me put it this way. They say the choice was between water for all or red wine for the few. And our comrades chose red wine for the few. And they gradually, over a few years, when Fanzel Slabet went out of South Africa to go and recruit the comrades to come back, to soften them up to the reality that the money we're going to give you, the money that that's going to be in your hands, it won't be fit and, for everyone. An elite has to be created, the bourgeoisie is going to be created against your own Marxism theories. And people are saying Jacob Zuma is one of those examples because he said with, the Afrikaners to discuss things. Cyril Ramaphosa also had a good relationship with Rolf Meyer, Thabo Mbeki, all of those big families when they came. By 1991 conference, they already at the time had lots of influence within circles because they were funded by the rich families. They came here without jobs, but they had flats and cars and everything because they were funded by these big rich families in South Africa. I don't know where you want to start it, but just contest it the way you like.
Okay, no, thank you. I think one of the things that we need to recognize is that when negotiations started, in fact, when they were about to end, the apartheid government, it was highly bankrupt to the extent that in 1993, what was then called the Transitional Executive Council had to even take a loan from the IMF. De Klerk did not negotiate because he was now becoming benevolent. He had to negotiate because the Afrikaner or the Nationalist Party was on its knees. And part of the reason that the Nationalist Party was on its knees was because of corruption. Ken Irwin, the former editor of the Sunday Times, put it succinctly when he said, corruption was like a drug for the nationalist government. And this was a government so bankrupt, it had no other option but to start negotiating, because at the same time you had sanctions at the time. So it is not as if Afrikaners were really, really in control of the country at the time. And equal to that, you had, the private sector, which did not really support the nationalist government. So that is the contradiction, that you had white people who were contesting power politically and economically. So big business did not want the Nationalist Party in charge in the 90s or post the 80s. So when the ANC started negotiating, that's why when you read, and quite interestingly, when you read some of the submissions from Harry Gwala, about what was then called when he was contesting Joe Slovo's willing buyer, willing seller. When you read Chris Haney's statements about how he viewed negotiations and others, you would then understand that their view at the time was that, look, let's not be soft, because the Afrikaners or the Nationalist Party is highly weak. But the reality is that the people who were negotiating for us, the key people who were negotiating for us, especially with the Afrikaners and the Broederbond, and who were part of what was then called the Presidential Task Team, it was President Zuma and President Mbeki. Of course, at the time, they were not presidents. But these were the people who eventually managed to reach an accord with the Broederbond, which is now called the Broederbond Accord. There is, minutes, people can look for the minutes of the NWC meeting, either 93 or 91, where Chris Hani is asking Jacob Zuma, why they, as the Presidential Task Team, they were negotiating with FW de Klerk and the Broederbond without consulting the ANC. And when you go through the minutes, President Zuma is defending FW de Klerk. And when one assesses, the decisions that were taken, one could say that perhaps the ANC at the time, or the few people who were negotiating, because the other reality is that when we look at the ANC, we normally see the ANC sold out. When the ANC collective, they were not the ones who were negotiating. I mean, you've got a person like the late Vela Pillay, who was the director of the ANC research group. It was called the Macroeconomic Research Group of the ANC, who was left in orientation. So they were given the mandate to develop the policy of the ANC. And when they were looking at the decisions that were taken at CODESA, they were highly frustrated. Padayachi, the late Prof. Padayachi wrote extensively about this, what happened during negotiations and after negotiations. You would observe that in fact, the negotiations were contested. It was those who had proximity to power who eventually, their decisions, of course, with the Afrikaners and with big business, they were able to chart the course for the ANC and the country, including the meetings that were taking place in London. If you look at the meetings that took place at Milner House in Oxford, in London, that meeting that took place between the ANC and Goldfields, the people who were there, it was, President Mbeki, President Zuma. The movie, The Endgame, it's based on those meetings, which Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela, of course, when he came out, Thabo Mbeki, Zuma, they were attending and negotiating with big business. And when you look at it from a short-sighted perspective, of course, you would say that they sold out. But when you view the world and the decisions that have been taken, either by Russia, either by China, Japan, and so forth, you would see that they had no other option because investors were prepared to pull out. And our assessment as ordinary people who are looking for employment and who assume that if you just have the state, you'll be able to create jobs. It's easy. It's an easy conclusion to say that they should have just kicked out the investors. They should have just agreed to a state which was not negotiable. Because if you look at post the 1994 elections, that was a GNU. It was a government of national unity. If you look at 1994, the composition of cabinet at the time, Mandela was the president, FW de Klerk was his deputy. You had, a litany of national party leaders, including others who were not even in the national party, but they were representing the banks. You had your Liebenberg as a minister. So, as I said, the world is different if you look at it from the outside. I think for me, what will make South Africa really work for all is when, as Black people, we start learning how to crack, the economy, how to start making money, how to create value from the economy. That's when we'll start participating as equals. But for now, to think that we could have done things differently, I think for me, it's short-sighted. And I think that all these leaders, we can blame them, like, the song, every generation blames the one before. But what are we doing? I mean, we sit in a better position. They went to prison. They came back as, they came back quite...
Multimillionaires.
Not all of them were multimillionaires. Of course, some of them cracked deals. We are cracking deals as we speak with white people. All of us, in fact, we are even individualistic. I've even come to a conclusion that I will not die for anyone. Of course, I can assist people. But this idea that a leader must die for you when you are not prepared to die for anyone. I mean, if you look at, how Chris Hani died, how Steve Biko died, how Ruth First died, would you say it was worth it? When you look at our generation, we expect those leaders who went to prison for us, who died for us, to have been, martyrs for us. When we are not prepared to be martyrs for anyone, I think we are just selfish. And it's because we also entitled as well. We are not prepared to die for anyone. We are not prepared to go and solve the problems in the townships. So who are we to judge those who came before us, who did their best, who sacrificed their youth for us? As I said, we sit in a better position to change the lives of our people, to start working together, to create a Black or an African agenda. We're not doing that. We are individualistic, yet we want others, to be saints. I don't think life works like that.
So, if let's talk about someone like Judge Klopp.
Mm-hmm.
He left the judiciary because he was a judge who got implicated and then impeached. Now he's a politician. What kind of the advantages that I drew? What kind of advantages will African people feed off someone like that? He spoke a lot about, Africanizing the law of South Africa versus the Roman Dutch law. Is it even practical? What kind of these great leaders are, okay, let me not say great leaders, old people who are coming into spaces that could be occupied by people. And I want you to contrast it with Helen Zille said to be coming back to Johannesburg. Yeah, what does it mean? Is it a failure on her side for not developing people? Yeah, you can start it with Klopp. I mean, he's at the age that he should be teaching people how to do things. Helen Zille coming back from retirement to come and lead the city of Johannesburg. Where are we going? Is it even possible for a young person to lead MK?
Look, what I know for a fact is that many people who are within the political arena do not have the solutions to solve the problems of society. Of course, at a welfare level, they can. But at an economic level, that's another chapter altogether. And you can draw comparison, for example, with the city of Johannesburg, which you just mentioned, where Helen Zille has been punted to become or to contest as a mayor. Ask the people of Johannesburg if they were given an option to choose between Helen Zille and Dada Morero, who just announced that he's going to have a team called the Bomb Squad. Who will they choose? They will probably choose Helen Zille. If Dada Morero is the best that the ANC can give the people or the residents of Johannesburg, and then you want the people, because Dada Morero is black, and then you want the people of Johannesburg to just accept it, you must be joking. You've got millions of ratepayers in Johannesburg who spend billions, which go into the coffers of the city of Johannesburg. Yet look at our city. This was once considered one of the best cities, in fact, the best city in Africa. Look at the city of Johannesburg, look at the infrastructure, look at the crime. So I think for me, I don't even think that Helen Zille is the best, of course. But in comparison to what we have at the moment. In the absence of the best, as they would say, the worst becomes the best. So I think the ANC or even Dada Morero must start pulling his socks. He must start taking the people of Johannesburg seriously. He's responsible for billions. He's responsible for state-owned entities within the city that are struggling, that are collapsing. So, it goes back to the issue of we as Black people being able to have tough conversations amongst ourselves, especially about governance and how we deal with the assets that we control. So it cannot be that because, we've got a mayor who is Black, we must continue supporting him. We can't support mediocrity. We must start speaking about meritocracy. Let the best come out. The ANC has produced quality executives. Let the ANC show us those executives. Let them take those executives to the forefront to lead. But of course, Dada Morero supports Fikile Mbalula. Fikile Mbalula needs Dada Morero to win the 2027 ANC elections. So we as the people of Johannesburg are stuck with such characters. And I say so, I've got a history with that. I led his PR campaign, by the way, when he was contesting for the ANC of Johannesburg. But I must say that from a governance perspective, remember, you've got the ANC. He's highly qualified to lead the ANC because the ANC does not pride itself in terms of leadership, of anointing the best. But the city is something completely different. Let Dada prove himself. Then we can start making those comparisons. Helen Zille is seeing a gap. That's why that's why she is positioning herself to lead. Because she sees a gap. She sees that people are highly despondent. She sees that the president is not doing anything about it. Instead of intervening, they are bringing another team to come and assist the mayor just to fix the roads. To fix the roads. When the city is spending billions, yet you cannot fix basic things. How are you going to assist in creating jobs, in creating a conducive environment for business people and investors? So for me, it's not a question of black and white. It's a question of Black people and Africans in particular start taking themselves seriously because we've done this before. Our forefathers who formed the ANC, they were meritocratic in character. They were men who left the country to study overseas. Some of them were even barristers in the highest courts in London in the dark days of colonialism and apartheid. So we cannot expect lower of ourselves. And that's what we continuously do. We accept mediocrity. And we also see it in the public sector, where public hospitals, public schools, police stations, they offer us the worst of services, but we accept it. We go to our courts, it's always a mess. So I think as Black people, we need to start having that conversation about sorting ourselves out. Because what's happening, it's just, it cannot continue forever. At some point, something is going to punish us. Something has to surely give where we start taking ourselves seriously, especially the taxpayers. Because you've got millions of people who work hard for this, for their money so that they can give to government. And the expectation is that the least the government can do is just to create a conducive environment. They don't want anything more from our government. They just want a conducive environment, safety and security, and a space where their children can thrive. So if we do not have that, a person like Helen Zille is going to come in.
Let's talk about women. Well, we are on Helen Zille. There's a death of women leadership, or there's a difficulty for women to ascend to political positions in political parties, and it makes the pool with which the electorate can pick from. An example would be, of course, Colin Makhubele, who was with Sarah, and the possibilities were very limited there for someone coming from a very small party to ascend into into being the president, and that's why she went to MK, because this is where the numbers are. We're talking about MK, we're talking about Mary Party versus Wisim Kweban. And we can, of course, ignore the powerhouse that is Comrade Grenade called Duduzile Zuma. All of this, when I spoke to Naledi Pando, I asked her who can be the best female president at this stage, because other aspirant females who wanted to be president of the country were shot down, and of course by the ANC Women's League at some point for choosing not to support their campaigns. And when I've got an opportunity to interview a woman, I always make sure that I put this question to you: is there hope, and who are these hopeful politicians who we might not regard them now, but in future they are going to be big players in our political space, and they might be our president? You can take it from anywhere.
No, thank you. I think the issue of women shows limitations in terms of the succession debate or the succession plan. But also it exposes, for me, a deficit. If you look at President Zuma, of all the women that he would know, he chose his own daughter to lead, who has no political background, but he chose his own daughter. When you speak of Colin Makubela, I mean, Colin had millions from the Jewish community. And as you would know, before the elections and towards the elections, she was the flag bearer for Israel. So to then start positioning her as some victim, I think it's, for me, it's not correct. She's not a victim. She had resources, and her resources came from the Jewish community. And of course, any community has a right to influence, and she agreed to be influenced. And her narrative, or her electoral narrative, was in protection of the state of Israel. And now she's leading MK, which shows again the ideological deficit within MK. Then you speak of Mkhwebane and Mary Party. Mkhwebane has no political background, but of course, it also shows that when she was deployed, she was not deployed in defense of the country, but in defense of the person who was in office, which is President Zuma. So for me, there are many young quality comrades, female politicians, but they do not get the support. Even if you were to mention highly senior comrades like Lindiwe Sisulu, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, Naledi Pando, show me the women that they have groomed. President Zuma still wants to lead at the age of 80 and above. And the person that he sees as a successor is his own daughter. Or the people who are loyal, extremely loyal, and who don't question him. So it tells you that it continues that, as Plato says, it is for the old to lead and for the young to follow. So the majority of the elder or the older generation, they do not have the conviction to hand over. They want to lead from the grave. And as they lead from the grave, they would want people who think like them, who pursue their ideals correctly or incorrectly. They want people who would be part of the cult, if I might put it like that. So the challenge is that politics in South Africa, it's highly funded. It requires a lot of money. So the many women who are there, they do not have the resources to get into the politics, and neither do they have support from political leaders who can groom and mentor them so that they can take over. So for me, that is the challenge. But I just also want to say that the ANC itself, the ANC of President Zuma before he left, it had taken a position that it will empower women. Because you must remember that the ANC was primarily formed by men. But it was formed by men who were their sisters' keepers, men who wanted to study and come back and change their communities and protect their women. So it was a completely different generation altogether. But of course, with apartheid, the ANC at the time took a position that the fight for freedom will not be complete without women. So many women were groomed within the ANC to lead. But as with many battles, they become casualties. Some of them, they agree to become tokens for male leaders. But it's the realities of politics.
Let's talk names. Let me deliberately start with the EFF. We've got Ompile Maoto there. She's like the most senior female. What are the likelihood of her leading the party itself or ever being the president of a country?
Well, the people of the country must decide who becomes their president based on merit. But she's there in the EFF. She supports a male leader. So it will depend on who Julius chooses. So if Julius chooses her, then she'll probably lead the EFF.
Not the fighters choose her over Julius.
Well, the EFF belongs to Julius Malema. So perhaps Julius can be weak. Perhaps Julius will eventually join the ANC or, have a merger with the ANC. But at the moment, it's Julius Malema who holds the cards and who decides who becomes a leader. So if I'm a woman and I choose to join a political party, understanding its constraints, understanding its view on women, I cannot then be characterized as a victim. So many of these women, they do not have a problem with being led by men. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with being led by men, as long as those men are fit and proper. But many women are not prepared to support each other. It's a reality. And at the same time, women do not groom other women to take over. So unfortunately, those are the hard, cold realities. Helen Zille is, in fact, she has demonstrated what a woman can do. And we can look up to her, not in terms of the ideology of the Democratic Alliance, but we can look up to her as a leader who is decisive and as a leader who, takes a position.
Can Mary Padi fall into that?
The lady from Mpumalanga?
Yes.
I don't know. I'm told that she comes from the coal industry, and I don't know who she is. The trucking industry. I don't know. It depends also on Jacob Zuma. Remember, MK Party does not have any ideology. It has not gone to conference. It does not have any theory. So anyone can lead, depending on who President Zuma chooses, not because they are fit and proper. I can tell you now that there are many women who are in MK Party who are very solid, who are ideologically grounded. But unfortunately, they do not have access to proximity. They do not have access to President Zuma. So leadership is not about proximity. To come to a conclusion that a person must lead because they are closer to Zuma or they like Zuma. You can imagine a full human being like myself having to take a position that I would be given a position within MK because I agree with everything that Baba says. It means I don't love myself. Of course, we must listen to leadership, but you can't listen to everything that leadership says. That's why MK has had more than 5 secretary generals, because it has no ideology. It stands for nothing and it stands for everything at the same time. As long as President Zuma says that it must go, it must go. It's an indictment because it renders you mentally inept.
Dalimpofu, when he finally admitted that he was MK, he defended the powers of Jacob Zuma and he compared them with the head of the executive in the South African government, to say like he can fire and hire ministers at his own will, and why can't why can't Zuma do it as a leader of MK? And as you know, Floyd was unceremonially kicked out for something as flimsy as meeting Bushiri. Do you do you feel sorry for Floyd?
Well, of course, Floyd knew what he was getting himself into. Floyd is not a victim. He wanted to be a minister. Julius did not want to go into
GNU.
into the GNU, as far as we know. So he decided to join MK Party, knowing its limitations. It's not a democratic party. When one man dictates, it's not democracy. And you must also remember that MK was not only formed by President Zuma. There were many people who went to President Zuma to give him this idea of a political party. Of course, I would know that Yodali Mpofu and others, using the court theatrics, they were in the process of forming something else. But when these guys from MK, MVA went to President Zuma, including the likes of McDonald, who used to work for President Zuma, for Isma Khashula, when they went to meet President Zuma to form this MK, because it was their concept, because they were members of MK-MVA, your Gorbachev, Mokocho, who's the deputy chair of MK, your Shelley Brown and others. It was not a Zuma party. And the idea here was that, look, MK party fought for the country, we want to continue that. So Floyd left EFF when it was at its weakest. And with Mzwanele Mkhwebane, who were given an opportunity when they were at their weakest to come within EFF. And EFF, in fact, relaxed all its guidelines to bring these people into parliament. When EFF lost numbers and they got lesser numbers after elections, they went to the next best thing, which was MK. So it's time and space. Time and space is just dealing with them. They are products of their own decisions. And as I said, you cannot, if you are a politician and if you are a grounded politician, you cannot join a party which is not based on any democratic principles. If you join that party, you must accept whatever outcomes, So that's the indictment about MK party. And of course, as I said, the succession. But someone like, from a political perspective, I think someone like Floyd would have done well to carry MK post the Zuma tenure. He's theoretically grounded. He's a good mobilizer. But as I said the last time, he flew to the sun and he got banned because he did not understand that already within MK there are people who are preparing themselves to take over. So he was just he did not read the balance of forces. So that's what would have happened to someone like Floyd. But ultimately, I don't think that MK will survive post-Zuma. It's going to be like COPE. It's going to be like UDM. Because as it has become a party of patronage. One of the reasons that Floyd was kicked out is that they were fighting for the millions that come from Parliament that is supposed to go to the Parliamentary Constitutional Office of MK, but people wanted to eat that money. Now you can imagine when local elections come and they start taking charge of municipalities and people will want to fight for the budgets of the municipalities. So the battle for the soul of MK, it's not based on any principle. It's based on patronage. It's based on state resources. The fact that now there is a move and there's a rush, to hold key positions so that people can start taking over in the next, local elections. And of course, many of them are prepared to work with the ANC. including the EFF. So that is a MK party. I mean, I said that, I don't think President Zuma knew when he was starting MK with some of these people that they were creating a monster that is premised on patronage, a monster which, because it's not formulated on any democratic principle, might be even worse than the ANC that we always poke holes at.
Dr. Litchfield Chabalala is an MK member. Mm-hmm. She, according to me, and I told her that I do not see a person like you thriving within MK because of her free thinking spirit and of a resolute spirit. I do not see her thriving. At MK, on the top 8, there's only one female, Mam Kize. And she came out of nowhere and she was leading. I remember at one press conference before she was there, they spoke about how there's an absence of female leaders there. We have seen few, and they keep coming. And those who are I don't know how to, who are surpassed by the blessings of Ubaba, people like Shirley Brown,
Boipelo Jarvis, Shirley Brown,
yeah,
Onika Mapisa. There are many.
Yeah. What then happens to them? How do they strike a balance between this parachuting and meritocracy? Because they too can't.
Do you
because
think
2026 is coming.
They do not care. MK party, look, I can tell you now that I'm one of when I was assisting MK, I was one of the people who was very loud on the representation of women, the representation of people who are not Zulu. I mean, there are people who say that I'm angry because I did not take a position or if I was not given a particular position. Of course, I was promised different positions within MK. But those who know me, including Klamulo Ndlela, including Natin Kleko and others, will tell you that I'm very steadfast. I do not compromise on my principles for mere positions. No, I don't do that. So when it comes to women, I don't think President Zuma even cares. I'll tell you this. There are over 100 people who are undergoing trials, because they supported or they are considered to have led the insurrection, the President Zuma insurrection in July. Over 100. MK does not support any of them. Yet when Duduzile went to court, the entire MK leadership went to support her. Yet you have all these people who, in the name of Jacob Zuma, some of them, perhaps, their matter is still to be decided by the courts. Some of those people include Onika Mapisa, who was highly, and in fact, she was part of the people who formed MK. She's in the periphery as we speak. So I do not see, maybe with Litchfield Chabalala, maybe she might emerge, but the reality is that any person who takes a position within MK, they must toe a particular line. And that particular line is not based on any ideological framework. You see, I would understand that I support President Zuma. I was one of the people who was in the forefront of supporting JZ. I was always propelled, either to use my writing capabilities to go on TV, to go on the mainstream media in particular, to convince people of the legacy of President Zuma. But I can assure you now that without any ideological, inclination, even Litchfield is not going to survive, because she might have a particular perspective. But then when you get into MK, which stands for nothing, I mean, you've got people who call themselves royal leaders who want to take over MK. You've got soldiers who want to take over. You've got tenderpreneurs who want to take over. You've got families of JZ who want to take over.
Religious leaders?
Oh, yes, of course. You've got...
Oh,
that's the problem. So, and these people, all of them, like it's a mess, because of course they see President Zuma as a father figure, and so MK, as I once said, it's a collusion of the wounded. It's a collusion of people who are in charge of state power at some point, and they're no longer in power. It's a collusion of people who are fighting for patronage. It's a collusion of people who see the opportunities that are in government. But of course, yes, you've got genuine people who want to see the country changing for the better. But Litchfield is there. She decided to join MK. So we'll see what happens to her. But for me, I think that the fact that all of us, we see ourselves through a leader, and we do not see ourselves as the change that we want to see. The fact that we see change only through political parties, and even when we are in political parties, we are not able to instigate the change. I mean, MK has been in parliament for a while. There is nothing fundamental that they've done to change the lives of our people. And it does not only stop with MK. I mean, we saw when EFF came into power, where they came with the 7 cardinal pillars, and they were talking about public hospitals, that their children will go to public schools, that they will use public hospitals. They came into power. It was a different discourse altogether. So the very idea that our lives can only change because of politicians who themselves are in a dilemma, who themselves, when outside of political patronage, they cannot survive. It says a lot about us. It says that we have not mastered ourselves, and we've not really looked at politics at a macro level. Because the people anyway who decide what happens in the country, it's business. It's not politicians. In fact, politicians rely on business. So, yeah.
Let's talk African National Congress. This GNU is, because this is what I'm reading from what DA says, it's a marriage of convenience. Steinhausen, when he was telling Trump, he says they didn't want to be in government. They didn't want to be in government. Are we still doing good with audio there?
Hello?
Yes, all right, sharp. According to...
Let me fix myself.
All right, sharp. Please do. Compose yourself.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't worry. None of this is going to be cut.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So according to Steinhausen, the only reason they're in the GNU is to block MK and EFF, because they call them the dogs. They call them the evil. Do you think ANC was forced by capital to choose DA over MK and EFF to partner with?
No, I don't think so. To the extent that I was there within the, the center of things when MK was post-elections, just a few days after elections, even to the extent that I had even called one of the leaders to ask them if they had, it was then the Secretary General, if they had, a paper, for coalitions. Because normally with elections, you would then produce a paper on how you're going to deal with coalitions, or if you're going to be in opposition. MK was prepared to go into...
GNU.
Well, you can call it the GNU. I don't know if it had a name, before it became known as the GNU. But there was a letter, a legal opinion that was produced on behalf of MK to say that, oh no, you don't have to go into a coalition with the ANC. You don't have to go to parliament when parliament was open. And there were some MK leaders who were prepared to take positions, to take ministerial positions. But I think some of the realities was that President Zuma was saying that, unfortunately, his position was that Cyril Ramaphosa had to resign. which for me did not make sense, because you are a leader of the opposition. You want to dictate to another organization on what it should do, especially with its leader. I mean, the ANC is the very party which defended President Zuma with Nkandla, with the Guptas. Now you are here dictating that the ANC, for you to work with the ANC, it must relieve its president of its duties. It did not make sense. So that's what happened. Nkamulo Ndlela met with leadership of the ANC. Many leaders met with the ANC. So this idea that the MK party was not prepared to work with the ANC is a fallacy. Even the EFF did have engagements with the ANC. Now, when it comes to the DA, if the DA was not really interested in the GNU, they would have left by now. It's not true that they were not interested, to the extent that DA wants more power. That is why the DA now is pushing a narrative that black economic empowerment, it's corrupt, that only 100 people have benefited from BEE, because towards every elections, what they do, they manage to divide the black vote. So also I want to indicate this idea that MK, EFF and the ANC will form a formidable opposition, or a formidable collusion, or how would you put it, coalition. Mm-hmm. For me, it's neither here nor there, because the question is that, do they have the expertise? Is the lady who was the correctional of Mam Kize, who's a correctional service? Yes. Is she qualified? Is she qualified enough? Is she free? Is she fit and proper? So I think what MK is doing, for me, they are doing exactly what many of us fought against when we were still in the ANC and when we supported President Zuma, because they've become a combative opposition. And what the country needs people with the right skills, people who are, professionals, people who understand how to govern. The country just does not need a person who wakes up today and raises their hands and is loved by President Zuma, and that person is ushered to lead. I think for me, that's a dangerous terrain that we are taking. And I think also we are not able to differentiate between political parties and the country, because the country is different to running a political party. Of course, anyone can run MK. Anyone can lead MK. But leading the country is something which is different. You lead the country, for different reasons, to create jobs, to create a conducive environment, so on and so forth. And the people that we are talking about, as I said, some of them have not even, ran a spaza shop in their lives. Some of them have never even worked in their lives. And you want to give responsibility to these people because they promise us the world. Remember, politicians tell us what we want to hear. And what we want to hear is not what they do in many instances, or even how, what they know how to do. So I think we really need to look at our politics in a different environment if we expect different results. So for me, I think that's very critical. But with the DA, look, the DA is keeping the ANC on its toes, which is important because unfortunately, leaders of the ANC do not know how to self-regulate. We can see what many of them are doing in their municipalities. So the DA is keeping us on our toes, which is unfortunate because it means we cannot regulate on our own. But at the same time, I would love to see, professionals. I would love to see graduates entering the political space. We can not only leave politics to politicians. It's important that, ordinary people with the right skills, the passion, and the expertise to govern and to manage, to start coming into politics.
I want to close it. Now, you're a researcher, and years and years of experience in political research and, policy formulations. You spoke about legal opinion offered to the MK just after the elections, how they read the numbers in the National Assembly, how they got motivated on how to swindle. I'm using a wrong word here. How to outmaneuver those who were in power, those who got more numbers than them. And one of those was, let this thing collapse, let it hang, don't be there, it will hang, it will collapse. And of course, it fell flat on its face. And I'm remembering a lot of political errors that were done in the MK. And at the time, I remember I said back, I say, it's something that we have not done before, but let's see what MK has a point here. Maybe let's not judge them too quickly. Darren Kempfer is a guy who was taken to parliament to go and become their researcher, and you compare Darren Kempfer with an academic like Dr. Kuma, it was going to be very difficult to compare the two. They called Darren Kempfer a TikToker. Mzanele Manyi said he was confident that they can do a motion of no confidence against the minister, something we have not seen before, and they've toned it down, and then it becomes so. Does this, as a researcher, does this show the lack of steadfast appointment and putting your ground down that we need fit and proper people to run MK, not just Olaki Chomian Tlamulo, Olaki Kempiarena. This is our force. Let's go with them. Is that proof that this thing is not taken seriously?
I think that's part of it. And if I might just give you a quick background, Zwanele Manyi was still with the EFF, remember, and when MK had to go to Parliament, to the first sitting of Parliament, and he called me about this issue when he heard that MK is not going to Parliament. And I had told him that it's his former colleague, who's currently the convener of MK in Gauteng, Duduzile, who was then working for Stella Ndabeni, who had produced one of the legal opinions that MK must not go to Parliament. And I believe that Mzwanele spoke to Ntleko at the time. So after that, I flew to Durban to meet Ntlamulo, Dr. Mtanti, who became the TG of MK. But at the time, he was in the presidential advisory group. So I flew to Durban. They were at Umhlanga.
5-star.
Oh, 5-star, of course. So, no, yeah, it was Umhlanga. So I even called one person that you know. I would not want to expose him. I called this professor to say that you need to give MK another legal opinion because from what I know, Parliament is going to sit with or without them. And what Dr. Mtanti at the time told me was that this professor is not a lawyer. And then after that, we were with the SG of MK, the acting SG of MK at the time, Arthur Zwani, and the convener of Gauteng. We had a heated debate about this issue. Because what I was asking them was that, why did you contest elections if you are not going to contest power? And when you contest power, you don't contest power, for anything else. It's for you to then start implementing your policies through governance. And also, if we were given the mandate to write about the ANC of Ramaphosa, it means that MK is not antagonistic to the ANC. So to now position the ANC as this enemy of, let's say, the revolution, for me, it was just unfounded. So unfortunately, they chose not to go to Parliament, and the rest is history. But the reality is that they were misled. Some wanted to go to Parliament, but they got an opinion that they should not go to Parliament. And I know, even when at the time, as I said, Mzwanele was just shocked. And he was just giving that position from an advisory perspective to say, But who's advising MK not to go to parliament? Who's advising MK not to participate in this battle of ideas at a governance level? So, unfortunately, the experience comes into play. And MK is where it is today. Oh, they were prepared to also govern in KZN. But I believe that the conditions, IFP they were late to the meeting, and IFP was not prepared to, give them what they were proposing.
Is it true, just sticking there, is it true that, I think it was Arthur Zwane at the time, who was then removed, Jacob Zuma cited that he was misled in terms of those meetings, that IFP waited and then Zuma did not show up. Is it true that they are blaming Arthur Zwane for not being in government in KwaZulu-Natal because they did not honor the meeting with IFP?
No, they went to the meeting, but they were late. And also, there's one thing that Arthur Zwane is not credited for. Arthur Zwane is the one who pushed for Brian Molefe to be in parliament. And it was through me. And I've been waiting for Brian to at least recognize how I ensured that, he goes to parliament. And, Arthur Zwane and other people, they managed to facilitate that process. Because if you recall, at the time, they had brought in Judge Hlophe. When he came in, he went to, I think, to the SABC at the time, and he was asked, why did you join MK? He said, no, it's a Zulu party, or, something along that line.
He wanted to go EFF, but he said, let me wait. And when he saw MK with that resonate with the Zulu nationalism, he felt at home there.
Yes. And I think what really irritated me was that, I used, when I was leading MK War Room, I even, used myself as a weapon to defend this, MK Zulu narrative, And then here comes Hlophe, gets appointed, and he says that, no, I joined MK because it affirms Zulu nationalism. And that's one of the things that disappointed me, and I had also shared that with Arthur Zwane. But Arthur Zwane is one of the people who ensured that they bring in Brian Molefe. And some of us fought really hard, to ensure that Brian Molefe goes to parliament.
On one of the mishaps, there was a time where they were adamant in those, running press conferences. They said they were going to go to the international court, to protest about their elections being stolen and stuff. And even during that time, voices were saying, guys, you are wrong. And people were saying it's actually, they feel sad for Nhlamulo Ndlela because it shows that it's not him. What it showed was, it was Ubaba who was telling them that, then do this. And they were afraid to face Ubaba to tell them, this is inconsistent with modern practices. Let's not do this, because when it fails, we are going to be embarrassed. And ever since that, it's very difficult for them to come back and to explain their decision.
I'm one of the people who actually believed that the elections were rigged. And I remember I did not go and vote. I was with the head of, she's now the head of, what is it called? Diplomatic something with President Zuma. I was with her on the day of elections. And she went to vote. I was sick at the time, but I honestly did not have a party to vote for. But I was earnestly focused on elections and looking at the numbers and the projections and so on. And our war room was, was on top of things. So when the IEC board just shut down and the numbers were not changing, I think it shocked all of us. And we were saying, no, something is happening.
So you believed 2/3 was in the bag?
Not 2/3, of course. Oh, no. I think anyone who believed, remember 2/3, it was just a narrative, to say that, Julius says that we are government in waiting.
Yes.
That was the 2/3 narrative.
Phapano, I went on the ground. I interviewed a lot of people just to gauge this 2/3, what they believed. Let me tell you, they believed in the, in their majority, they believe that 2/3 is actually in the bag.
You mean
MK members.
Oh, okay.
Remember what happened is after the 16th of July, even before December ended, they already had posters about their website crashing because of over 3 million members. You were in the war room. You could have produced that narrative.
I was not there.
Don't distance yourself.
I was not there.
And I was asking them, I remember comparing them to say, look at the people who need to win elections. I mean, if you are hovering around 4 to 5 million, I mean, you are in the seat of government, and you guys already have surpassed those numbers in terms of membership. The EFF is trickling around 1 million. ANC has about over maybe 2 million in membership, but you guys, we are talking about membership only. You even beat their elections. People believed in the end. It was very scary because they believed the elections were stolen. When Vavi came out to say, produce this evidence that says there was overscale. Errors, yes. Attempt to steal, yes. But over whole-scale stealing of elections, I mean, that election rigging, it would be very difficult to produce. And you and I sitting here 12 months after that, nothing has come forward. Does it make you regret, or does it scare you that 2026, it will be the same thing, where people are finding it difficult to produce whole-scale, election rigging, not just errors in few municipalities that can't even produce, that can't even tilt the council? Does it scare you that this might come again?
Okay, for me, I think what would be important is the first thing for me is the deployment of people to the IEC. Remember, politics is not as innocent as would want it to be. For me, the question is the question of transparency. That's critical to me, and the people who control the technology and the people who count the votes. For me, that's extremely critical. The numbers did not make sense, and of course, it's my own perception. But the reality is that when the board just went off, the IEC system just went off, it also did not make sense.
Not for the first time, of course.
Yeah, so it just did not make sense. But I do not believe that MK was at any stage going to get a 2/3 majority. I did not believe that at all. And of course, the theory would be, I think, Gauteng would have been punished. Mm-hmm. I believe that, sometimes I say, Panyaza is a 30 plus, a premier. But, my perception would be that he got more than that. But it's.
What about KZN for you?
I think also with KZN, I think MK perhaps could have gotten more. I think, of course, yes. I think at the time, Duma and Mutolo, they were not going anywhere, But I think with Gauteng, it was a different story. But I'm saying that this is a perception. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying that when we were sitting there and analyzing the numbers, the system just crashed for a very long time. But I did not think that, MK had to then go to the extent that it went. And, there was information coming in. People were just, feeding, the head of election with, we know there's a technical person in the IEC. So there were people who were feeding MK leadership with the information that, and they were saying that they are inside with the information that the elections have been rigged. But I think they know better now. Look, I think, there are good people within MK. I can tell you that. I know for a fact Mzwanele is a great person. I've led with Mzwanele before. He was the president of PPF. I was the spokesperson of PPF. He means well. Unfortunately, he got caught in the web of Jacob Zuma. I think the last discussion that I had was that, President, I think you must start your own party. But where I am now, I think he must go back to business, because I think that's where he can play a very instrumental role. I think he has been embarrassed enough by supporting President Zuma. And the constant here is that everyone who supports President Zuma their credibility gets questioned. You know, they are closed off from opportunities. But he continues to, you know, become... No. I'm talking about Jacob Zuma. I don't think he realizes the harm that he has created for many people who have supported him and who believe in him. I think he is steadfast in his conviction of who he is, and in the process, he does not comprehend how many lives have been destroyed, you know, supporting him. But at the same time, I think that, thank you. At the same time, I think it's punishment for many of us who believe in this, you know, this leader, in this savior, this, you know, cult persona. But I hope that Mzwanele would be able to come out of this with his head very high, because I know what he's capable of. There are not many people in MK who are as qualified as Mzwanele Manyi when it comes to legislation and policy. And that's why I thought it was short-sighted of him to leave the EFF, because he was given all the platform to pursue the EFF policy position. But they had to let go of Mzwanele for some reason. But as I said, there are good quality comrades in MK party. The only unfortunate thing is that they are grown-ups who believe in this cult leader and who cannot do anything for themselves outside of positions.
Last question, you decide how short you want to close it. Carl Niehaus, Ace Magashule, decided not to join Jacob Zuma. Are they now tired of following someone that they think, I'm going to be embarrassed, I'm going to get banned, I'm not going to get my loyalty reciprocated with this man? Ace Magashule and Carl Niehaus for you.
Look, I saw Ace Magashule in court. And I think, you know, my heart skipped a bit. There are many things that I did not agree with, some of the decisions that Ace took when he was still a Secretary General. But I still understand the compromises that he made, also from a monetary perspective, to support Jacob Zuma with his court cases and everything else. But he's on his own today, you know? And also it's a question of the cult of personality. But Ace decided to go his own way, and he's being punished for that he decided, you know, to take his own position, to join, you know, to start his own party, because he was kicked out of the ANC. And for that, he has not been forgiven. With Carl has been very clear about his position. Carl is an ideologue. And he has never, ever been prepared to join any cult. And I respect Carl very well. You know, it was myself, Carl, Andile Lungisa, when Jacob Zuma was sent to prison, who called a press conference in defense of the then, former president. And I think what we have done for Jacob Zuma, you know, I think in the 7 years, 8 years, and I'm not even going to posture us as victims, but I think we were just, we fell into this cult trap, but we were very genuine, because we thought that, you know, white capital did not want Jacob Zuma. So we firmly believed that there was a palace coup against Jacob Zuma. But we are politicians in our own right, you know. So it's okay for Carl not to join Jacob Zuma. It's okay if people do not decide, you know, to join the MK party and to question and critique Jacob Zuma. Because, you know, what followers of President Zuma do not understand is that he's not above reproach, you know. He's got his own weaknesses, of course. He's got his own strength. I mean, many of us, we went out there trying to justify the legacy of President Zuma. So anyone who believes that if you question Jacob Zuma, you are an agent. I mean, some of us now are characterized as agents. Someone said to me yesterday, I'm being paid by Rob Herzog. I said, oh my God, I would love Rob Herzog's money, but I would never sell my soul. I would stick on on my own journey and what I believe in, which is the total liberation or economic liberation of black people. But I believe that in the process, we must work hard. Doesn't mean that we must be given things for free. But I think, on one hand, I always say that for anyone who is, because there are many victims, and many of them, they are lying low, who supported Jacob Zuma and who took decisions that they were given by Jacob Zuma. They're lying very low. Some of them have lost their houses. Some of them are non-entities, if I might put it like that. Some of them are bench warmers. And not because of anything, but because they supported what they believe was a genuine cause. And you supported a person who dances his time away, who does not even care about, the dead bodies that he has left behind. So I'm proud of Carl, to be honest. And I'm hoping that this case, Isma Khashula, at some point it will come to an end. I don't know if he did not take the money. I don't know if he's innocent. I'm sure the court will come to a conclusion. But I think Ace in particular, for me, he represents what any sober person should not do. Never follow a cult leader. Of course, you must have a position, but never ever follow a cult leader. Stick to your ideological inclination, but do not be, a cult follower. You'll end up being a suicide bomber. And that's what I used to say to Carl. I used to say, Carl, some of the things that you say, you will end up in trouble. Of course, support President Zuma, but do not compromise yourself in the process, because you will lose out and he will continue to live his life. As we speak, the president has got, the state still supports him. But many people who are in the periphery now, they do not have that opportunity, to get grants from government, to get. So it is what it is. We just have to learn from what we have seen and from the politics in the past. It's 8, President Ramaphosa. Zuma is 9 years, 17 years. Yeah.
Mashiane, politically incorrect. So I hunted her down for a long time. She's one of those who said they regret their close association with President Zuma. If you ask Jabulani Khumalo, he says, chess master my foot. People who were close to Jacob Zuma got banned. Floyd got banned. Are we going to find a time where Floyd is telling us how bad it was to associate himself with Jacob Zuma? I spoke to the Triple Aim representative of Baruti. They took you, we sat for 2 hours, taking you through every process that you needed to understand how Zuma not only betrayed them, but made them fools. I don't want to go longer. There are lots of podcasts where people are saying so. But Zuma, like I said, remains the most prominent politician, the most favored, the most loved, and is even given the unfortunate label of a cult figure because he's loved by many. When I was with Jabulani Khumalo, I told him that, but remember, as much as the truth that you have told today, people will still tell you that they don't care. They voted and they supported MK because of Jacob Zuma, not you. Let me close it there. Mashiane Politicallyincorrect will hear you from the comments. Tada. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.